When we think of psychedelic music from the 60s, the Rolling Stones are not often the first band that comes to mind, but the Stones also had their own trippy and experimental side. This was an era when sitars, mellotrons and hypnotic grooves found their way into their sound, resulting in some of the most unusual and adventurous songs of their career. The Stones' psychedelic period remains one of the most fascinating chapters in their history, and in this video, we're diving into 10 of their most mind-bending tracks, songs that reveal their creativity, their willingness to experiment, and their unique ability to push the boundaries of rock and roll. Let's begin. Citadel is one of the best and most underrated songs from the album Their Satanic Majesty's Request. The track is built around a raw, gritty riff by Keith Richards, characterized by its tremolo effect and a truly weird and unusual pinging sound. The pinging sound was achieved by using a metallic tubular handheld device, which was brought close to the pickup and would ring when a chord was struck. On the lyrical level, the song was inspired by Fritz Lang's Metropolis. Citadel depicts a bleak future ruled by Bible-thumping zealots, brutal political control, dehumanizing technology, and unchecked capitalism. And in addition to that, it's the first song to ever mention some of the transsexual women who were part of Andy Warhol's entourage at the factory, anticipating the work of Lou Reed. The track mentions Candy Darling and her friend Taffy, whom the Stones had met while visiting Andy Warhol at the factory a year earlier in 1966. In an interview later in the 70s, Andy Warhol remembered,
in November, when the Stones album, Their Satanic Majesty's Request, was just out, Candy and I were in the back room at Max's Kansas City, and when Citadel came on, she said, "Oh, listen, this is the song Mick wrote for me and my girlfriend Taffy. Listen to the words."
In the late 60s and early 70s, Lou Reed also wrote about Candy Darling in songs such as Candy Says by the Velvet Underground or Walk on the Wild Side, his first major hit as a solo artist. Citadel is one of the greatest and most overlooked psychedelic gems by the Stones, and the track has been covered by several bands over the years, most notably The Damned in 1981. And Red Cross in 1984. The Stones are rarely regarded as pioneers of psychedelia, but Paint It Black is one of the earliest examples of 60s psychedelic music. To put this into context, the song was released as a single 4 months before the Beatles' Revolver, and just a week after 8 Miles High by the Byrds, which is usually cited as one of the earliest psychedelic tracks alongside Shapes of Things by the Yardbirds, which was released a couple of months earlier in February 1966. Of course, the Beatles pioneered the use of sitars with Norwegian Wood, released in December 1965, but the song presented a melody which was still very much rooted in Western music, whereas Paint It Black openly experimented with Eastern and Middle Eastern melodies. This exploration of Indian and other Eastern influences by bands like the Yardbirds, the Byrds, and the Stones themselves helped revolutionize popular music during the first half of 1966. And it even influenced the Beatles, who released Rain later in June, their first song to openly explore Eastern melodies. From a lyrical perspective, the song's dark and doomy words have prompted many critics and fans to cite it as a precursor to Gothic rock. The lyrics of Paint It Black were strikingly different from those found in most popular music of the mid-60s. It explored darker and more introspective territory, dealing with grief, existential angst, and the shadowy side of human emotion. Paint It Black hit the airwaves in early May 1966 and was originally met with mixed reviews, with many critics criticizing its experimental style and doubting its commercial potential. But the song became a huge hit, reaching number 1 in both Britain and the States. We Love You was released in late August 1967, 3 weeks after Mick and Keith were granted bail and their drug charges successfully overturned. After 5 months of legal hassles, looming prison sentences and sensationalist media headlines, the song was a message of appreciation to all the fans who showed support for the band. But the track was also a sarcastic message to all the authorities who wanted to see them behind bars. The song espoused a strong anti-establishment stance, as evidenced by some of the lyrics. Despite being released during the so-called Summer of Love, the song seemed to look at flower power from a cynical point of view.
We would just sing a bit after about 2 or 3 months. When you're talking about flower power, I don't mean ethically, I just mean very superficially, the beads and the flowers and everything.
We Love You starts with the sound of a cell door clanging shut, and it quickly turns into one of the most anarchic and chaotic slices of psychedelia ever recorded. The song had an almost proto-electronic sound, with a totally innovative and unique mellotron arrangement by Brian Jones. And it featured John Lennon and Paul McCartney on backing vocals. The two Beatles were in charge of the high harmonies during the chorus. The Stones filmed a promotional video for the song, which was loosely based on the trial of Oscar Wilde. The film, which was directed by Peter Whitehead, was supposed to be premiered on Top of the Pops, but it was banned by the BBC, who deemed it unsuitable, and it was never shown on the television programme. The B-side of the single was another excellent psychedelic song called Dandelion. The track also featured Lennon and McCartney providing the high harmonies that can be heard throughout the song. We Love You peaked at number 8 in Britain and number 50 in the United States, where Dandelion was promoted as the A-side and peaked at number 14. Just like the previously mentioned Citadel, 2000 Light Years from Home is another standout track from the Satanic Majesties album. The song's surreal and cosmic vibe was enhanced by some innovative use of the mellotron, once again courtesy of Brian Jones. At the time, bands tended to use the mellotron to mimic string or brass arrangements, but Brian Jones's approach was different. He wasn't trying to mimic strings or brass, but instead used the instrument to create textures and unusual melodic lines, which gave the song a dark and eerie atmosphere. The surreal cosmic lyrics evoke isolation, alienation, and interstellar travel. Together, these sounds and words position the song as a precursor to the space rock style that bands like Hawkwind would explore later in the 70s. Oddly enough, even though the song was released as a single in several European countries, it was never issued as a single in the UK. In the States, 2000 Light Years from Home appeared as the B-side to She's a Rainbow, another track that was somewhat inexplicably not released as a single in Britain. Child of the Moon is one of the best B-sides the Stones ever released. The song was issued in May 1968 as the flip side of Jumping Jack Flash, and it's widely regarded as the last gasp of the Stones in psychedelic mood. The track stood in stark contrast to the A-side, which marked the Stones' shift towards a more organic and stripped-down style. But this very contrast is what makes the single not only one of the Stones' finest, but one of the greatest singles of the entire 60s. With its hazy production and surreal lyrics, the song feels like the missing link between the Satanic Majesties album and the raw and organic sound of Beggar's Banquet. The Stones started working on Child of the Moon during the recording sessions for their Satanic Majesties request. And they recorded the official version of the song in March 1968 at Olympic Studios with Jimmy Miller as a producer. The band even filmed a promo video for the song. The video, which was directed by Michael Lindsay Hogg and shot at Epping Forest, featured actress Eileen Atkins. Child of the Moon remains one of the Stones' most obscure and underrated songs from the 60s, showcasing their psychedelic experimentation and their ability to create hauntingly beautiful music. She's a Rainbow is one of the few psychedelic tracks by the Stones which is nowadays considered a classic. The song was more accessible than most of the material on the Satanic Majesties album, and even though the Stones themselves have often dismissed the record as a misstep, She's a Rainbow has become one of the most beloved Stones tracks from that period. The opening line was a nod to the song She Comes in Colors by Love.
My love, she comes in colors. You can tell her from the clothes she wears.
While the two songs aren't musically similar, it's a cool connection that shows the Stones were tuned in to bands like Love, one of the most underrated American groups of the period, who sadly only achieved a cult following in the UK at the time. One of the song's highlights is Nicky Hopkins' piano, which carries a musical box-like quality that reinforces its whimsical feel. And the track also features a magnificent string arrangement by future Led Zeppelin member John Paul Jones, which was further enriched by some subtle but effective mellotron touches by Brian Jones. As mentioned earlier in the video, She's a Rainbow was inexplicably never released as a single in the UK, appearing only as a B-side in several European countries. The song was only released as an A-side in the States, but the Stones didn't even bother to promote it, and as a result the single only managed to reach number 25 on the charts. Please Go Home was originally featured on Between the Buttons in the UK and later included on the US compilation Flowers. The track is built around a hypnotic Bo Diddley-style beat, a nod to the band's rhythm and blues roots. But the arrangement is drenched in layers of fuzz guitar, feedback, echo, and studio trickery that push it deep into psychedelic territory. The song has a gritty and chaotic energy, which is heightened by Brian Jones providing eerie flourishes with a theremin, while Jagger's snarling and distorted vocals add a raw and almost abrasive edge to the hypnotic groove. The song was recorded at RCA Studios in Los Angeles in August 1966, and it captures the Stones moving into unapologetically weird territory, experimenting with way-out sounds that foreshadowed the psychedelic material on their Satanic Majesties request. Please Go Home remains an overlooked gem, a fearless studio experiment that reflects that late '66 moment when the Stones, along with many of their contemporaries, began embracing unconventional sounds and structures that would soon define psychedelia. Just like the song Citadel, another song from the Satanic Majesties album which eerily predicted the future was 2000 Man, and its lyrics are foreboding and uncannily accurate. The song presents a futuristic perspective where the protagonist reflects on his life in the year 2000. The lyrics portray a sense of alienation and disconnection, and the mention of an affair with a computer adds a layer of commentary on the growing reliance on technology and the potential for emotional detachment in the digital age. It's quite amazing how the song almost gets it right in its predictions, blending humor, social commentary, and imagination to create a vision of the future that feels uncannily like the world we live in today. The song was never released as a single, but it's yet another song from that period in the Stones' career which has become a cult classic. The song was later covered by Kiss in 1978 and appeared on their album Dynasty. In Another Land stands out for being the only Bill Wyman composition to ever be released on a Stones album, and this is one of the most psychedelic and whimsical recordings of their entire career. The song was recorded on a night when Wyman had shown up at the studio and found that the session had been cancelled. Feeling frustrated that he had potentially wasted time in driving there, engineer Glyn Johns asked him if he had anything that he'd like to record. Wyman recorded In Another Land with Steve Marriott and Ronnie Lane from the Small Faces, who helped out on guitar and backing vocals. Marriott's unmistakable voice can be clearly heard during the chorus. The next day, Glyn Johns showed the song to the rest of the Stones, who all liked it and decided to include it on the record. Wyman's vocal was treated with a tremolo effect, and the song takes listeners on a whimsical, psychedelic journey through a surreal landscape. The lyrics are playful and absurd, full of strange characters and dreamlike imagery, creating a sense of escape from everyday life. The fact that a Stones album featured a song written and sung by Bill Wyman was already unusual, but even more surprising is that the track was released as a single in the States, not as a Stones single, but under Wyman's name. The B-side featured The Lantern, another standout song from their Satanic Majesty's request. The single reached number 87 according to Billboard and number 62 according to Cashbox. This track from the 1973 album Goat's Head Soup is the only Rolling Stones song from the 70s that seems to hark back to their psychedelic period of 1967. Musically, the track is atmospheric and experimental, featuring a mix of bells, exotic percussion, and a haunting flute line played by Jim Horn. The unusual instrumentation creates a dreamlike ambience, reminiscent of their earlier psychedelic work. The song explores themes of love, magic, and the transcendent power of music, and its structure is unconventional, with no traditional chorus or verse pattern. Instead, it flows like a continuous meditation, with each section blending seamlessly into the next. Can You Hear the Music is one of the most obscure and unusual songs in the Stones' 70s output, serving as a fascinating bridge between their 60s psychedelic era and their 70s sound. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments which songs from the list are your favorites, or share your own psychedelic Stones picks. See you next time.
What do you think of LSD? What do you think of LSD? Is it nice? It's very nice. I think LSD is very nice.